Have you ever noticed that there's a phase that's worse than being completely broke, which is when you manage to save a little bit of money, like 300, set the cent, 1,2 reais. And instead of feeling peace, you feel even more fear because now there's something to lose. And your mind starts guarding that money as if it were a sleeping baby and any noise could wake it up. And then you open your bank app 10 times a day. You do mental math in the shower. You remember bills that haven't even arrived yet. And out of nowhere, you think, if I lose this, I'm going back to hell again. And that's exactly where a lot of people give up. Because it's not a lack of willpower, it's the brain going into survival mode. And when the brain enters that mode, it doesn't want strategy. It wants quick relief. It wants the pressure to stop. And then you do what you've always done. You buy something small to deserve it. You order food because you're tired. You pay in installments because next month I'll figure it out. And when you realize it, that little reserve that was supposed to bring security turned into a source of anxiety because it became a countdown. And the question no one asks you is, why does saving a little sometimes cause more despair than having nothing at all? Because when you're at zero, you're already numb. You've already accepted it. You live improvising, putting out fires, and that gives a kind of false calm. It's awful, but it's familiar. And the brain loves what's familiar. But when you start saving, even if it's a little, you enter the anxiety plateau, which is that phase where you still don't have enough protection to relax, but you already have enough to suffer in advance. And your mind treats the possibility of losing those 800 reais as if it were a tragedy much bigger than it really is. So you get tense, defensive, irritated. Every expense becomes an internal argument. And the worst part is that this is exhausting. And when you're exhausted, you start to sabotage yourself. As if someone turned down the background noise, and you finally manage to think without that sense of urgency. And that's when you move from survival mode to rational mode, because before that, what's in charge is the part of the brain that only wants to avoid pain and seek relief. And after that, you hear about a plan. Say no, negotiate, wait, compare, and make decisions that help you win in the long run. Isn't just a lack of money, it's an excess of urgency. It's living with your neck stuck in an invisible noose where everything has to be solved today. And when everything has to be solved today, you always choose the most expensive path, even without wanting to. So the this in the title isn't a secret investment. It's not magical passive income. It's not working 18 hours a day. It's something much simpler and much more powerful. Today I'm going to give you a step-by-step of what to do every day in a way so simple it seems silly. But silly is continuing to do what everyone does and expecting a different life. And I'm also going to show you why this works, even with a low salary, even with debt, even with kids, even with rent. Because the secret here is to stop trying to earn more before stopping the money leaking out, and especially to stop making decisions in a panic. Picture the scene, because it might be yours. You get paid. You pay the basics. There's some money left that you don't know if it's little or a lot because you have no clarity. You live your life. The credit card eats away at the edges. One day you open the app and get that punch in the stomach feeling. And you think, how did I work all month and I'm back here again? Then you try to control yourself. You stay strong for 2 days. On the third, something happens. You fall off the plan and guilt comes along. And guilt doesn't make anyone rich. Guilt just makes people seek comfort, and expensive comfort is exactly what keeps you poor. The step-by-step that changes, this is the following. And I'll warn you right now, it doesn't start with a spreadsheet or cutting everything out of your life. It starts with a small decision that you repeat until it becomes identity. Because when you repeat something every day, you're not just creating a habit, You're creating a different person every day at the same time, preferably right after lunch or right after brushing your teeth at night. You're going to do 4 moves always in this order, as if it were a fixed sequence, because the order is what pulls you out of improvisation. First move, you open your bank app and look at your balance and your card. Without judgment, without drama, without phrases like I'm trash. You look at it the way you look at a car's dashboard, period. You're not there to blame yourself. You're there to know where you are. A lot of people don't do this because they're afraid to face it. And that fear is expensive because money loves darkness. When you don't look at it, it disappears. Second move, you write down in one place. It can be a notes app, a notebook, a simple app. 3 numbers, plainly, how much came in this month so far, how much has gone out, and how much is left. You don't need to categorize everything. You don't need to detail anything here. It's just the scoreboard of the game. This takes 2 minutes. And this scoreboard changes everything because it takes you out of the feeling of, I think it's bad, and puts you in the reality of it's like this. Poverty is full of guessing. People who improve their lives replace guessing with numbers. Because numbers don't argue with you, numbers guide you. Third move, you choose a single protective action for the next day. Just one, small, specific, and you write it down. It can be tomorrow, I'll bring food from home. It can be tomorrow, I won't use the card. It can be tomorrow, I'll call to renegotiate that bill. It can be tomorrow, I'll sell that thing that's sitting there. It can be tomorrow, I'll cancel that subscription. It can be tomorrow, I'll go to the grocery store with a list. It can be tomorrow, I'll transfer 10 reais to my emergency fund. And here's the point. It's not the size of the action that matters at the beginning. It's the frequency. Because frequency creates a floor, and a floor creates security. Fourth move. You automate a daily microdeposit, even if it's ridiculous. R$5, R$7, R$10. And I know you're going to think this changes nothing, but it does, because the money isn't being saved for the amount, it's being saved for the message you send to your brain. Every day I pay myself first. And when you do that, even small, you start to break the identity of someone who only reacts. You start to become someone who acts before the problem happens. And here's something that might irritate you, but it's liberating. In the beginning, you're not saving money, you're saving control. The money comes later as a consequence. Now let's make this real with real life drama, because this is where life happens. You're at the end of the day, tired. Your phone vibrates. It's a promotion. You think, I deserve it, and you really do deserve rest. But the promotion doesn't sell rest. It sells dopamine, that quick relief, and you buy it. And when you buy it, you also buy tomorrow's anxiety, because tomorrow the bill will still be there, but now you've lost a piece of your breathing room. And what this daily ritual does is put a break between impulse and action, because you'll remember the scoreboard. You'll remember you'll remember the protective action you wrote down. And this is the beginning of wealth, creating an interval between what you feel and what you do. A poor person, financially and mentally, is someone who feels and acts at the same time. A person who improves their life feels, breathes, waits a bit, decides, and this is trainable. But I need to be honest, if you do this for 3 days, you'll feel like nothing happened and you'll want to quit. And that's where you differentiate yourself, because your brain will try to pull you back to improvisation, to the old pattern, to I'll deal with it later. And you'll think, this is too little. But it's not too little. It's the beginning of the system that will stop your life from turning into a sequence of emergencies. Do you know what destroys the financial life of an average person the most? It's not a big purchase. It's the sum of small decisions made while tired, rushed, scared, ashamed, without clarity. It's the Uber that becomes a habit because you're late every day. It's delivery that becomes routine because you're exhausted every day. It's the small installment that turns into a snowball because you want to breathe. And when you create this ritual, you start solving the root, chaos. And now I'm going to show you why this makes it impossible to stay poor over time without miraculous promises. Just real life logic. First, because you stop being surprised by predictable expenses. Most unexpected expenses aren't unexpected. They're predictable and ignored. Car taxes aren't unexpected. School supplies aren't unexpected. Medicine isn't unexpected. Basic home repairs aren't unexpected. They only become unexpected for those who don't look at the scoreboard and live in the dark. When you look every day, you see the problem while it's still small. and a small problem is cheap. Second, because the daily microdeposit creates a reserve that grows without you feeling it. And here's a psychological trick. Saving 10 riyals a day hurts less than saving 300 all at once. And 10 a day for 30 days is 300. If it's 20 a day, it's 600. If it's 5 a day, it's 150. And even 150 already changes the kind of decision you make, because it stops you from going into the credit cards, revolving interest over something stupid. Third, because the daily protective action turns into a list of small wins that add up. Today you bring food. Tomorrow you cancel a subscription. Then you renegotiate a debt. Then you sell something. Then you swap an expensive habit for a cheaper one. And when you add this up over 60 days, you no longer recognize your month, because the money doesn't disappear anymore. It starts to obey. And now the most important part that almost no one talks about. This daily ritual isn't about being perfect. It's about reducing damage. You don't need to become a monk. You don't need to cut everything. You need to stop taking punches without raising your hands. Because some people live financially as if they were in a fight, but with their eyes closed. Open your eyes, raise your guard, and the game changes. But there's a common mistake here that makes people do everything right for a week and then quit. The mistake is wanting to turn this ritual into a big event. The person wants to sit down, make spreadsheets, categorize expenses, watch videos, print things, and then it becomes a project. And projects are exhausting. And the brain hates projects after a heavy day. That's why the ritual has to be small and fixed, because small fits into any day, even a bad day. And there's another mistake. Saving money. Well, you can grab it. Because if you leave your reserve in the same account as your daily spending, at some point you treat it as an extension of your salary. Ideally, you separate it in a way that takes effort to touch it, even if it's a separate account, a bucket, a place you don't see all the time. Because the goal isn't just to save, it's to remove temptation. And here I want you to understand something that changes how you treat yourself. If you're poor, you're probably not bad with money. You're tired, overloaded, and alone in this subject. No one taught you systems. They taught you guilt. They taught you figure it out. And when you live in figured out, you live in expensive. Because figuring it out costs interest, costs fees, costs shipping, costs urgency, costs bad choices. What you're building with this ritual is a way of living where money becomes logistics, not shame. You start treating bills as tasks, not sentences. And that's mental freedom. And then over time, the threshold shift happens. There comes a moment when you look at your reserve and realize that even if a small problem happens, you don't need to humiliate yourself. You don't need to borrow. You don't need to pay in installments. You don't need to go into revolving credit. And that feeling, even if the reserve is still small, changes your posture, because you no longer negotiate with desperation. You negotiate with calm, and calm saves money. You start saying no with less pain. You start waiting for a discount. You start comparing prices. You start cooking more. You start selling what you don't use. You start talking about money without freezing. You start understanding that getting rich at the beginning is just stopping the bleeding. And when you stop bleeding, any raise, any extra income, any side gig, any opportunity becomes construction, not plugging holes. Now, to make this even more practical, I want to give you a simple mental model to repeat, because this holds you on the days when you feel like quitting. Every day, when you open your bank app, you're going to ask yourself 3 questions quickly without drama, like a checklist. What did I do today that makes me poorer tomorrow? What can I do today that makes tomorrow lighter? What is the smallest action I can carry out, even tired? And you'll notice that most of the time, the answer is small. Bringing food, not opening the shopping app, delaying a purchase for 24 hours, paying a bill before spending, setting aside 10 reais, sending a message to renegotiate, canceling a subscription, making a list before the grocery store, walking a bit more, and saving on transportation. Small, repeated every day. And then you understand why it's impossible to stay poor with this. Because poverty feeds on repetition to just bad repetition. And you're going to swap bad repetition for good repetition. You're going to swap the habit of reacting for the habit of protecting. And when repetition changes, life changes. You won't get rich overnight, but you'll stop living with your chest tight every day. And that's already a victory many people never experience. And it's at that point that you start to have mental energy to look for the next level, which is increasing income and improving bigger choices. But first, you need to get out of the swamp of chaos. Now, tell me something honestly with yourself. What destroys you more today? The low amount you earn, or the lack of clarity and the number of last-minute decisions you make during the month? Because most of the time, people discover that it's not just the salary, it's how the month happens. Like you're always chasing your own tail. If you do this ritual for 30 days, you'll feel something that seems simple, but is rare. You'll feel that money stopped controlling you all the time. And when that happens, you stop being an adult living on the edge and start being an adult who drives their own life, even with little. After a few days doing this daily ritual, something quiet happens. You don't wake up rich, you don't get a sign from the universe, but you start noticing that the month becomes less chaotic. The bills still exist, the due dates still come, the salary is still the same, but the feeling changes. Before, you were run over by the days. Now you start to see the day coming. And this difference seems small, but it changes everything. Because when you start seeing ahead, you start choosing ahead. And those who choose ahead almost never pay the maximum price. The maximum price is always paid by those who choose at the last minute. This is where an uncomfortable truth comes in. A lot of people think they're poor because they earn little, but they stay poor because they always make decisions at the worst possible moment. They decide when they're tired, when they're scared, when they're ashamed, when they have no margin left. And margin is the most valuable thing in financial life. Margin is the space between the problem and desperation. The daily ritual you started creates it doesn't solve everything, but it creates space. And space allows strategy. Now, I want to show you how to turn this ritual into a simple system that doesn't depend on your memory or your motivation. Because if it depends on that, one bad week knocks everything down. The first thing you need to understand is that money needs a path. When there's no path, it leaks. Not because you're irresponsible, but because life pushes. Someone asks for help, an offer appears, an expense comes up, you get tired, you give in. If money doesn't have a defined path beforehand, it will go down the easiest path. And the easiest path is almost always the wrong one. So the next step isn't earning more. The next step is deciding where the money will go before it arrives. Even if it's little, it works like this. You're going to divide it mentally, no spreadsheet needed, no fancy names needed, into 3 fixed places. Just 3, simple enough not to exhaust you. The first place is survival money. It's the money that pays the basics. Rent, electricity, water, simple food, transportation, medicine. This money doesn't argue. It doesn't negotiate with desire. It has absolute priority. Leisure doesn't go here. Treats don't go here. Impulses don't go here. Dignity goes here. The second place is protection money. It's the reserve. Small at first, almost symbolic, but sacred. This money exists to prevent a small problem from becoming a big crisis. It doesn't exist to make you comfortable. It exists to give you time. Chimi to think. Chimi to decide. Time not to humiliate yourself. The third place is living money. And this is important. Living is not luxury. Living is what keeps you from giving up. The mistake many people make is trying to escape poverty by punishing themselves, cutting everything, living in a financial prison. This doesn't work because no one can stand living without reward. So you set aside a small, honest amount to live. It can be a snack on the weekend, a coffee out, a cheap subscription. Small, but conscious. What destroys you isn't living. What destroys you is living without limits. When you define these 3 places, even if just in your head, you start giving money a function. And money with a function behaves better. Now comes the delicate part, one that messes with pride and identity for many people, the credit card. The card isn't a villain, but it's a magnifying glass. It amplifies who you already are. If you live improvising, it becomes a trap. If you live with a system, it becomes a tool.
The problem isn't paying in installments. The problem is paying in installments without knowing how many installments already exist. The problem is paying in installments to fix an emotion. The problem is paying in installments because you're too tired to think. So the rule here is simple. And maybe you've never heard anyone say it like this. The card can only be used if it doesn't steal clarity from next month. That means that before charging anything to the card, you need to know 3 things by heart, without opening anything. How much is already committed next month, how much is free, and whether this purchase will make you lighter or tighter. If you can't answer that, you don't swipe. Not because it's forbidden, but because it's dark. And decisions in the dark are expensive. That's why that daily ritual is so important. It keeps this information alive in your head, not as weight, but as reference. Now let's talk about debt, because if you have debt, ignoring it only increases shame, and shame paralyzes. If you're in debt, your first goal isn't to pay everything off quickly. It's to stop creating new debt. It sounds obvious, but it isn't. Some people try to pay debt with the same behavior that created the debt, and that's like trying to fill a leaky bucket. So the absolute priority is to stop the bleeding, stop the leak, even if the payment is minimal at first. Because while you're creating new debt, any effort turns into frustration. After stopping the leak, you choose one debt to attack first. Not the biggest one, not the prettiest one, not the one someone said is better. The one that keeps you up at night. It's the one that humiliates you the most. It's the one that weighs on you emotionally. Because debt isn't just math. Debt is mental weight. And when you remove mental weight, you free up energy to solve the rest. And here's a point almost no one talks about. You don't pay debt with suffering. You pay debt with repeated strategy. Repeated strategy is this thing you've already started building. Daily clarity, micro-protection, small wins. That's what keeps you from quitting halfway. Now let me take you to a very common scene so you can recognize yourself. You spend 20 days of the month relatively controlled. Then a bad day comes. A tiring day. An unfair day. A day when you feel like you just work and don't get anywhere. And on that day you want something that gives you a sense of control. So you buy. Or you pay in installments. Or you order food. And in that moment it feels like it solved it. But the next day comes the financial hangover. And along with it comes the most dangerous phrase of all. I already messed it up anyway. That phrase keeps people poor for years, because when you think you ruined everything, you quit everything. And the system we're building here exists exactly to stop you from using that phrase. You don't ruin everything with one bad decision. You only ruin everything when you use one bad decision as an excuse to keep making mistakes. The daily ritual pulls you back to center the next day. No drama, no punishment. No now, only next month. It's just coming back. Coming back has always been more important than getting it right every time. And now I want to show you what happens after 60 to 90 days living like this. Start to notice that money doesn't disappear anymore. It runs out sometimes, but it doesn't disappear. And that's very different. Before you looked and thought, where did it go? Now you know. And knowing hurts less than imagining. You start anticipating expenses. You start buying better. You start making fewer tired mistakes. You start arguing less about money with the people you live with, because money stops being an invisible monster and becomes a concrete, solvable problem. And then something happens that changes the game. You start respecting yourself financially. It's not empty self-esteem. It's built respect. It's you looking at yourself and thinking, I'm not rich, but I'm not a mess. And that changes how you negotiate, how you work, how you ask for a raise, how you do side gigs, how you accept or refuse things. The person who lives in chaos accepts any condition. The person who has a minimum of structure starts choosing better. And choosing better is the beginning of earning more, even before the raise happens. Because you start having mental energy to think about extra income without desperation, without falling for scams, without miraculous promises. You start seeing small, real, possible opportunities. Selling something, providing a service. It's learning something simple. Nothing grand, but consistent. And consistency beats desperation. Now, I need to warn you about a danger at this stage, because a lot of people get lost here. When you start having a little more control, you feel like accelerating, doing everything at once, fixing years of mess in 1 month. And this usually goes wrong. Your financial life didn't become messy in 30 days. It won't be organized in 30 days. What you're doing here is changing the direction of the boat. The boat is big. It takes time to turn. Once it turns, it doesn't turn back easily. So the right pace is boring. It's repetitive. It's almost dull. And that's a good sign. A healthy financial life is kind of unemotional. Too much emotion is usually a sign of risk. And that's why I insist so much on this point. It's impossible to stay poor doing this every day, not because this makes you rich fast, but because it takes you out of the place where poverty reproduces itself. Poverty reproduces itself in improvisation, in haste, in exhaustion, in shame, in silence. In the absence of a system, when you create a system, even a simple one, you start leaving that environment. When you leave the environment, the result changes. When you stabilize chaos, when the month stops being a sequence of scares, something happens that you may never have truly felt. Space appears in your head. There's still not extra money, but there's mental space. That's rarer than it seems. Most people live with their minds occupied, putting out fires, paying late fees, explaining themselves, blaming themselves, defending themselves from their own reality. When that noise decreases, you start thinking better. Thinking better is the real beginning of earning more. Here comes a simple and hard truth. Income doesn't grow in desperation. Income grows when there is a minimum of emotional stability. Someone who is suffocating accepts anything, any hours, any promise, any poorly explained proposal. Almost always this ends in frustration, exploitation, or wasted time. The system you've built so far exists to stop you from falling into these traps. Now I want to show you how to use this mental space to leave survival mode and enter building mode. Without fantasy, without motivational phrases, without crazy plans. First, you need to understand that increasing income isn't an event. It's a parallel process. It's not something that replaces what you already do. It's something that runs alongside it. And the biggest mistake here is trying to change everything at once. The person wants to change jobs, start a business, study something complex, all at the same time. And that breaks because you're still reorganizing. So the rule is extra income first, main income later. Extra income not to get rich, but to create breathing room. Financial breathing room reduces fear. Less fear generates better decisions. Better decisions open bigger doors. But before thinking about what to do, you need to answer a question that almost no one answers honestly. What today consumes my energy without giving me almost anything back? It could be excessive commuting. It could be an expensive habit. It could be a social commitment that became an obligation. It could be a job that pays poorly for the wear it causes. It could be a disorganized routine that leaves you tired all the time. While this isn't faced, any extra income becomes more weight. Because earning a little more and staying exhausted is a trap. You improve the number, but worsen your life. And a bad life generates bad spending. So the first gain here is recovering energy. That's why that daily ritual seems too simple. It exists to reduce mental fatigue. Less fatigue, more clarity. More clarity, better choices. Let's get practical. The safest way to increase income at the beginning isn't to invent something new. It's to explore what already exists around you and that you ignore because you've always been running. Something you know how to do minimally well. Something someone has already asked you for help with at some point. Something that solves a simple problem. Something that doesn't require a big investment. Something that can be done on a controlled schedule. You don't need to love it. It needs to work. It can be a simple service. It can be selling something you don't use. It can be helping someone with something you already know. It can be a small, occasional side job. Small, real, no glamour. The mistake here is comparing your beginning to someone else's peak on the internet. That destroys motivation. You're not building status, you're building margin. And every bit of extra income that comes in at this stage has a clear function. Strengthen the reserve and reduce dependence on credit. You don't use extra income to raise your standard of living now, you use it to buy future calm. That's what changes the game. Because when the reserve grows a bit more, you cross that psychological threshold we talked about at the beginning. The brain relaxes, and when it relaxes, you start playing better. You negotiate salary better. You refuse bad things. You wait for better opportunities. You learn with more patience. You position yourself differently. And this starts to reflect in your main job. Now let me tell you something no one says clearly. Poverty is also a lack of choice. Choice only exists when you're not cornered. A person who lives without a reserve doesn't choose. They react, they accept, they swallow, they adapt. And that slowly undermines self-esteem. And low self-esteem generates bad decisions. It's a cruel cycle. When you start breaking this cycle, even slowly, you feel something new: financial dignity. It's not luxury. It's dignity. It's knowing you're not one late bill away from losing everything. It's knowing you can take a small hit without falling apart, and that changes how you see yourself. Now, I want to touch on a sensitive but necessary point. Many people remain poor because, deep down, they believe they don't deserve stability. It sounds exaggerated, but it's not. Those who grew up seeing financial chaos normalize chaos. Those who grew up seeing scarcity learn to live squeezed. And when something starts to improve, a strange anxiety appears, as if it were too dangerous to be okay. That's why many people sabotage themselves precisely when things start to work. They spend more. They relax too much. They lose focus. Not because they're weak, but because the brain prefers what's known over what's safe. The daily system exists to keep you centered in those moments. It reminds you of who you're becoming, not who you were. And here comes an important identity shift. Stop seeing yourself as someone who tries to get organized and start seeing yourself as someone who takes care of money every day. This seems like a detail, but identity commands more than goals. Someone who sees themselves as organized makes mistakes and comes back. Someone who sees themselves as a mess makes mistakes and quits. Now let's talk about the near future, concretely. After a few months living like this, 3 things tend to happen at the same time. First, your reserve starts to truly exist. It's not huge, but it's real. It fulfills its function of protecting you. Second, your debts stop growing and start shrinking, even if slowly. The mental weight drops. Third, you start noticing opportunities that used to pass you by because you were too busy surviving. And this is where many people finally understand something that changes everything. Getting rich at the beginning isn't about adding things, it's about removing haste. Haste makes you pay more. Haste makes you pay in installments. Haste makes you make mistakes. Haste makes you accept crumbs. When haste goes away, money starts to go further, even without increasing. Now I'm going to tell you something you need to hear calmly. You don't need to be exceptional to escape poverty. You need to be consistent in an environment that pushes everyone toward unconsciousness. The world is designed for you to spend while tired, decide quickly, pay in installments easily, get distracted, not look. Doing the opposite of that already puts you ahead of most people. And that's why I state, without motivational phrases, without exaggeration, it's impossible to stay poor if you do this every day. Not because this turns you into a millionaire, but because it takes you out of the place where poverty perpetuates itself. You start living in a different environment, mentally, emotionally, and over time, financially. And now, I want to close this cycle the right way. Because this isn't just a video. It's a commitment to yourself. If you made it this far, it means something made sense. It means you saw yourself in these situations. It means you're tired of always living on the edge. So what I'm asking you now is simple and direct. If this content helped you organize your mind, leave a like. Because that shows the platform that this kind of conversation needs to reach more people who are suffering in silence. Subscribe to the channel because here we talk about money the way real life is, without fantasy and without humiliation. And comment the word **control**, so I know you watched until the end and that you're willing to take command of your financial life, one day at a time.